This is Marketing Management Money, and we are discussing today the balance sheet. This is the financial statement that is not as familiar to most small businesses and entrepreneurs. Many times this one gets overlooked. We're a lot more comfortable with our profit and loss statement, but we're not as comfortable with the balance sheet. So what we're going to do is we're going to take just a few minutes and we're going to walk you through some essentials of the balance sheet to familiarize you with the balance sheet and to give you some quick tips on what you're looking for when you look at that balance sheet. So the balance sheet has a basic fundamental equation to it. It's assets equals liability and equity. And so if I were to put that down on paper, I would have all of my assets, and those would balance with the sum of my liabilities and my equity. And that's where the balance portion of the balance sheet is coming from, is the fact that the assets are balancing against the liabilities and the equity. I've seen a lot of businesses and entrepreneurs get a little bit confused with why this matters. Like, why do I care that my assets are balancing with my liabilities and equity? Well, this is why, and this is the simple tip that you're going to need to know to get started here, and that is that we use liabilities and equity to pay for the assets in our company. So if I have any assets, think of buildings or equipment or, I might have some inventory, accounts receivables, cash in the bank. All of these are different forms of assets. If I have assets in my company, there's only two ways that I am purchasing those assets. It's either with liabilities, which is another word for debts, or they are purchased with equity. Now, a lot of times people get a little confused on this and they think, well, wait a second, I didn't go out and get investors to, come into my business. So what do you mean equity? Where is this equity coming from? Well, there are lots of sources of equity, and two common sources in a small business are going to be the net profits that are going to carry over into the balance sheet side of things. So at the end of the day, usually at the end of the month or the quarter or even the year, when you are looking at the profit and loss side of the financial statements, you're going to have your sales less your expenses is going to give you profit. So at the end of the year, we're going to have our net profits, and those net profits that are still in the business are going to carry forward in the form of equity to the company. And so you might have a net profit carry forward that is going to increase your equity. So it's possible to get equity from the business itself. The growth of the business itself is going to produce some of that equity. And if you think about it, what are those profits doing? Well, you're using those profits to purchase assets. And sometimes that asset is just cash in the bank. I have a lot of profit in my company. I'm able to have a lot of cash in the bank because of it. And so that's just a form of how you could have net profits that are going to convert over to the equity side, which then in turn are going to increase the assets in our company. Another one that is very common but often overlooked is the fact that we will have owner's equity that is going to go into a business. And so the owner is going to invest into their own company, and when they put that money in, that money is used to fund the business. We see this a lot when the company is just starting up. If it's a small business, a one-man or one-woman show is oftentimes going to have the owner put up all the money to start the business. Well, that is now owner's equity that was used to purchase equipment or, to purchase a building or to purchase inventory to turn around and sell. All of these things are happening, but they're growing the assets with what? Equity. And so you don't have to have outside investment coming into the company in order to see the assets increase by the equity side of things. So anytime that we're looking at assets in our business, those are either growing by the debt or the equity, i.e. the investment going into the business. That's the first thing that we are going to want to look at when we are looking at the balance sheet. Now, another key thing to keep in mind with the balance sheet is understanding the difference between current assets and fixed assets. So in the asset section, on my current assets, I'm going to have 3 categories that are going to fit into that current asset. I'm going to have my cash, I'm going to have my accounts receivables, and I'm going to have my inventory. For you really small businesses out there who are just getting started, you might not have a lot of receivables or inventory to start off with, but I tell you, as your business grows, so does the need for receivables and inventory also grow. Now, if you are strictly a service-based business, then you really aren't going to have any inventory, because inventory is going to be the goods that you're going to sell. And so if you're not selling any goods, if you're only selling services, then you won't have any inventory, but you definitely will have receivables, especially as your business grows and increases. And I want to manage those 3 current assets, because those are what are going to impact my cash flow the most. And this is one thing on the balance sheet that we really need to keep track of, and that is that cash line item. When you look at the profit and loss statement, you start with the top line of sales, and then you pull out all of those expenses, and then you have a bottom line of profits. And so your mind intuitively thinks, oh, top line sales, bottom line profits, it's the bookends, it's easy to look at, those must be the most important. But when you look at the balance sheet, it doesn't necessarily calculate the same way, because the bottom line is going to be the liabilities plus the equity. It's going to be the balance portion of it. But one of the most critical things for a small business to be looking at with their balance sheet is going to be that cash line item. And sometimes it feels like it's tucked in a little bit, like it's not as prominent as maybe that profit line is going to be on the P&L. But nonetheless, it's very important, and we want to keep track of our cash. We want to make sure that we have adequate cash flow in our business, because that's the lifeblood of our business. And so when I'm looking at those current assets, I'm really wanting to make sure that I'm staying on top of my cash and my cash flow. Now, the accounts receivables and the inventory are the 2 pieces that are going to impact cash flow the most from the balance sheet. And so I'm looking at how quickly am I getting my receivables? Am I collecting on my receivables? And I'm looking at how quickly am I selling my inventory. In financial lingo, this is called turns, my receivable turns and my inventory turns. And so if you're not familiar with receivable turns and inventory turns, those are calculations that you need to become familiar with. And so I would recommend looking that up. They're very common calculations. It's not difficult to do, but you want to see how often your receivables are turning in a year and how often your inventory is turning in a year. And then when you calculate those inventory turns and those receivable turns, you're going to transfer that to the number of days. And that's done by dividing it by 365, or sometimes they'll use the number 360. If this is getting a little bit high-end numbers, don't worry, we have lots of trainings, lots of opportunities for you to really dive into this. And so you can take advantage of our Growth by the Numbers training, which is found on tabletwise.com. It's going to walk you through step by step all these things that we're talking about. Or you can just get online and you can check out inventory turns, receivable turns. But what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to know how many days your receivables are outstanding, how many days your inventory is outstanding, and you're going to want to manage those days. So if you're doing that, if you're looking at how the liabilities and equity are funding your assets, and if you're managing your cash flow by managing your accounts receivable days and your inventory days, you're on the right track to learning how to correctly manage your balance sheet. We hope you enjoyed this quick discussion. If you have any questions, you can reach out to us, Ryan at marketingmanagementmoney.com. You can find us at marketingmanagementmoney.com. You can find us at tabletwise.com. Search for Marketing Management Money to see all of our trainings that are going to help you grow your small business and be successful in all of your endeavors. Thanks.